Welcome to episode 78 of From the Shed End with myself, T-Dot and Theo. How you doing?
Not bad, thanks. I think it's officially known as Blue Monday today, and it's good to celebrate Blue Monday. People do celebrate it, but have a Chelsea win, so it doesn't feel so blue and gloomy. I mean, it feels blue because it's Chelsea related, but not so grey and gloomy. So I'm doing well. Very cold here in London once again, but keeping warm here at home. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not bad. I forgot it was Blue Monday. Most Mondays recently have probably been blue for whatever reason, but yeah, no good. And yeah, just like you said then, I think having a win under the belt always helps going into a new week. But before we get into the content, please go and subscribe to the channel. So if you hit the Linktree link in the description, it will take you to all the social accounts, Spotify accounts as well. So make sure you do that before you leave the YouTube video or the Spotify episode that you're listening to. But as we just said, a win, finally a victory at the weekend. But before we get into that victory, I think we do have to talk about the Fulham game the earlier on in the week. Give me your thoughts and assessments on that game, because it was kind of a game that I felt we should have won, set up to fail, based on the tactics, formation, lineup, etc. But I want to hear your views on the Fulham game.
I thought, like you said, there were some really promising passages of play, particularly those that involved João Felix in the first half and the first 10 or 15 minutes that he played of the second half before the unfortunate, but I think it was a well-deserved red card. We've got to admit it. It was a typical striker's lunge towards the player. And as soon as he did it, I knew straight away that it was a red card. But I thought he was really promising. A lot of energy, a lot of pace, creating kind of space that our players, our strikers, the likes of Havertz, Aubameyang, Mount have failed to create in the past. And he just looked really promising, really lively. And we haven't been doing enough of. He was shooting. Sure, it was maybe some tame efforts towards Bird Leno, but he was shooting, which was really good to see. But yeah, we were set up to fail. I thought it wasn't really Chalobah's day. I thought he looked really shaky, and obviously very unfortunate that the first goal had to be Willian. Of course, it had to be Willian, but deflected off Chalobah and crept past Kepa. Second goal as well, I think, was avoidable. I think the defenders didn't do well enough to mark out Vinicius, and Kepa kind of comes out and then retreats. And as soon as he does that, you know it's going in. It's going to loop over his head. But yeah, I think one of those games, I think if we stayed on the pitch with 11 players, I think we would have stood a chance of at least snatching a point. As soon as we dropped down to 10 players, it was, Fulham in control. They created the better chances. But definitely a game, that I think we could have at least had something from the game. But like you said, set up to fail. I thought the same kind of players that often go missing in these games went missing, the likes of Mount, Havertz. I just didn't think they did enough. Koulibaly as well. He got a goal, but he looked really shaky alongside Chalobah. I think the only one that maybe did himself justice was Felix before the sending off, and maybe Thiago Silva. But yeah, just really disappointing. I think that game alongside the Arsenal one back in November were probably my most frustrating defeats this season.
Yeah, no, I echo pretty much all of what you said, and I think I said that on the earlier video that I did in the week. But I just think, when you've been playing the back four for your last, 5, 6, 7 games, you revert back to a back five almost with the 3 centre backs. You haven't got wing backs. You haven't got Reece James. You haven't got Ben Chilwell. Cucurella was on the bench again. Credit to Lewis Hall, who I thought had a really good game against Fulham. Had a really good chance, and it's creeping. Mm-hmm. We'll get onto the Palace attempt as well, but it's creeping in now that he's getting into the right places. He's making the right runs. He's in the box, waiting the ball. And he just needs to be clinical in front of goal. He's still young. He's only 18, so to expect for him to be able to be playing in the Premier League and to be scoring goals from his position, it's not. I don't expect him to do that. He's still learning his trades. I do think he was exposed a lot in that Fulham game, and I know he gave the ball away a couple of times. But you look at Koulibaly, who is experienced. He's supposed to be the one that's helping Lewis Hall on that left side. He did do that. And I think the same for Azpilicueta as well in terms of Chalobah. Chalobah looked very. I mean, that's probably one of his worst performances in the Chelsea shirt that I can remember. And Azpilicueta as well. I mean, why are we playing the the system that doesn't really suit Aspilicueta. We know that he has got the legs to run up and down the wing. He can't really get forward as much. It exposes Chalobah. But I do agree for the goal, both Aspilicueta and Chalobah for Willian's goal. And I did say in a previous episode, Willian will score against us in that game because you just knew it was going to come. It was just a Willian goal. Cut in on the right foot, used the defender as the shield. Kepa doesn't see the ball to the last minute. It's Willian all over. That's his trademark. So yeah, I mean, João Felix. Let's quickly talk about him. Debut, coming on a loan, 6 months. Say maximum 16 million in terms of a fee, paying 100% of the wages. He's suspended for the next 2 games and also suspended for Crystal Palace at the weekend as well. But give me your thoughts on João Felix overall in terms of the deal, but also from what we've seen of him for the best part of half a game in Chelsea.
I mean, obviously, when he was at Atletico, we know how Simeone likes to play. It's a very defensive kind of setup, but I don't think that favours João Felix's ability. He's a very kind of creative player, pacey player, and he was brilliant at the World Cup with Portugal. And I think that's why maybe him and Simeone never saw eye to eye, and there's been this kind of internal feud amongst the two of them, which maybe meant that he wanted to go out on loan for the next 6 months, especially as there's still kind of rumours about Simeone's future come the summer. But what I saw from him in the 60-odd minutes that he played against Fulham were really promising. It's something that we've missed all season, like I said, just kind of getting past players really easily, looking to put the ball into the box, looking to shoot. It's just something that we just haven't seen enough of from the likes of Mount, Havertz, Aubameyang, and all the other kind of offensive options we have. And I sound crazy because you never really want to make a judgment after half a game played. But if that's what he can put up, and have that consistent kind of rhythm to his play, then I think it's a move that we maybe should look to make permanent in the summer. Of course, we should revisit this question, in a couple months' time. But I think if Potter's football allows him to play that football that we saw against Fulham, then I think it's really promising, and he might be enjoying it a lot more than the football that he was able to play under Simeone at Atletico. But it is a lot of money for a loan. I do agree. It's a very expensive loan, but I think if somehow by a miracle we get into top 4 and João Felix plays a part in that, no one will ever even question the price tag on the loan fee. But I think there's been more expensive loans. I think I saw some crazy like Agala's loan to United was more expensive across the 9 months that he was there. But no, I think it's an area of the pitch that we really needed to some players to fill in, especially with the injuries we have. I know people go on about how we have so many different players that can play winger, striker, number 10. But we have to remember that I think it's Pulisic's going to be out for another 3 months. I think Sterling's going to be out for another 2 months. Broja is not going to be fit until next season, most likely. I think Zakaria is the latest one who's got an injured. Loftus-Cheek, we know that he's kind of in and out of the squad. Aubameyang's just like a shadow of himself lately. So I think it makes complete sense to take him on loan. And there's now talks that there is kind of an option, or not an option, but there's possibility, given our relationship with Atletico, to commence talks in the summer of making it permanent. But like I said, that's something we should revisit as Chelsea fans and give our opinion on in a couple months' time.
Yeah, I agree. I think with the option to buy, I mean, when I sat down and initially when you look at a tweet or you see someone send you something and it says, no option to buy and we're paying the wages and all the rest of it, that could actually just suit us. We might have other players in mind that we want to bring in during the summer. Maybe João Felix isn't one of them. So why would we need an option to buy? Why would we need a mandatory option in there? It just probably doesn't make sense in terms of the deal. But I think if Pulisic wasn't out for as long as he was, I don't think this deal would have been rushed through maybe as it had been. You just named and reeled off a couple of the players I added to that injury list already as well. Dennis Zakaria, obviously coming off from the Fulham game, added to that list as well. So there's a lot of injuries that are coming up throughout the team that's been happening all year. So there's no guarantee when you get an option to buy in a deal that the player wants to move or the club allowed the sale to go through anyway. So I don't think it's a stopper in terms of us still going in and trying to get him. I did read that maybe some in terms of the extension of João Felix's contract, there might be something in terms of the release clause in that, which is why they've allowed him to go on loan with possible extension of that deal. it's always Lukaku there. I mean, we still need to get him off the book. So does he go in the other direction? Do we keep João Felix? There's so many options, and you're looking at the signings and the way that Todd Bowley and obviously Graham Potter are trying to formulate something at the club. It does kind of tell you that João Felix is probably one of those players that would fit the profile of the club at the moment. But I was impressed with him. 60 minutes or not, there's something that you can see. He looked like he had the rain was taken off him. He was able to just run around and roam and do what he needs to do, take on players. Even 5 minutes into the game, I think there was a moment. He megged someone. I can't remember who it was. It might have been Anthony Robertson, but I might be wrong there. Gets the ball into the box. I think Havertz has the first attempt. Lewis Hall has the follow-up attempt as well from that. Talk to me quickly about Lewis Hall before we move on. Both games now, Fulham and Crystal Palace, but to be keeping Cucurella out of the team, he's doing something good. I mean, he's a promising prospect, 18 years of age. He looks the real deal going forward.
It's not easy to keep Cucurella out of the team, given his current form. I don't know what Cucurella offers to this team. Defensively, going up the pitch, I've spoken, on WhatsApp, I've slated him numerous times to you. But I think he's a very frustrating player to watch. But that being said, having Lewis Hall has been fantastic in the games that he's featured. Obviously, I think he played both the Carabao game against City before Christmas and before the World Cup, and then the FA Cup game against them recently as well, and Fulham, and then Palace. And I think he just looks like he actually does want to get the ball into the box. Like you summed it up perfectly. He's still young, he's still raw, and I think once he adds that kind of ability to maybe improve his shooting and his ability to maybe get a goal, score goals, because we know that with wing backs, that's what, at Chelsea they've offered in the past, the likes of Alonso, Reece James, Ben Chilwell. They've been fantastic contributors to goals as well. So I think once he can kind of improve that element of his game, I think he'll be a fantastic player for us. He's had a lot of chances. He's been involved in a lot of the kind of play that we've kind of created as well. I'm sure we're going to talk about that chance he had against Crystal Palace in a bit as well. But really exciting player. I think what's good with him, he's going to improve. He's not the full package yet. He's going to improve. But I think definitely a player that I'd much rather see in a starting 11 and feel more confident seeing in a starting 11 than Cucurella right now.
Yeah, 100%. We've mentioned injuries as well. The Athletic put out a injured suspended Chelsea 11 last week, which I thought, and I'll put in here at some point. Mendy obviously in goal. You'd have Reece James. Obviously this formation wouldn't work for Chelsea, but you've got Reece James as your defenders, James, Fofana and Chilwell all out at the moment. You've got Pulisic, Loftus-Cheek, Kante, Zakaria, who's now joins that list, Raheem Sterling, Armando Broja, and now obviously João Felix is suspended for the next 2 games. That's a big list. That's a squad already itself. It's crazy to think, but obviously last, I think Friday, maybe Saturday, the internal review from the medical, or an internal review of the medical staff is taking place at the club. Well overdue, in my opinion. What's your thoughts on that?
Well overdue. I've spoken about it so many times on this pod, how the medical staff and team need a big kind of kick up the arse and shake up, because you look at Fofana being rushed back, getting injured in the behind closed doors friendly against Brentford straight away. Same thing with Reece James, plays 60 minutes against Brentford, against Bournemouth after Christmas, gets injured. You do wonder if that was 60 minutes too much, 10 minutes too much, or if he wasn't fit yet. Ben Chilwell again got injured. I think it was against Zagreb, kind of similar injury to the one he had last season. I just think players are being rushed back too quickly. They're not being assessed properly. Obviously, I'm not an expert when it comes to these injuries, but they're supposedly the experts in the field and they should be doing a better job. It's simple as with Chelsea Football Club, and these injuries have cost us top 4. It has cost us top 4, let's be honest. I'm sure there's question marks around the manager and the way that we're set up to play games, but these injuries, they've really messed us up this season. And you look at the other clubs, they don't have that many injuries. They really don't. I saw people talking about Arsenal having an injury crisis. I think the only one they have is Gabriel Jesus. Yeah, I just find it crazy that, we've had so many injuries and question marks haven't really been erased before this. But I think it's time. And I think there was another statistic since the start of last season. We've had 97 injuries in total, which is the most of amongst any club in the Premier League, or I think maybe any club in Europe for all I know. And, we're a top club. We've got supposedly invest so much money in our facilities and, rehabilitation kind of for the players. So I don't think it's normal that we're seeing, this many injuries. And I think a large part of those injuries of those 97 probably came when Graham Potter brought his medical staff with him in the summer, I think. I'm sure we were having a lot of injuries with Tuchel last season. Maybe COVID played a part as well. But I don't think something's not right. And I think it is kind of bugging some of the more senior players, the likes of Kovacic, the likes of Jorginho, Thiago Silva, especially. I think some of those cryptic tweets that maybe his wife has been posting were maybe directed towards the backroom staff or the physio team. So yeah, I think it's definitely time an auditing is done and to maybe figure out as well what can be done to improve it, especially.
Yeah, and something just needs to change. I mean, we're talking about almost back to back now. I know we had the injuries under Thomas Tuchel and the old medical regime, but they seem to be increasing, and the ramp up of injuries is scary to think about. Look at the length of time N'Golo Kante's missed this season. You mentioned Reece James and Chilwell, and they're massive injuries. They're not injuries that are keeping you out for 1 or 2 games. We're talking a massive chunk of the season, which you said has caused us to potentially miss out on top 4 this season. In a way, I'm sort of glad that if we do miss out on top 4 and we do miss out on Europa altogether, I'm glad about that, because it will allow some of these players who potentially just need to be playing 1 game a week as they come back and try and get themselves back into full fitness. Maybe not even for next season, the season after, the Reece James or a Ben Chilwell, they don't need to be playing 2 or 3 games a week. They just need that 1 Premier League game, maybe the FA Cup, they get a rest, or the League Cup. But I think if they can just focus on playing 1 game a week as opposed to, Champions League and then back in the Premier League and Europa League, whatever, there's so much football to be played. And some of these players haven't had a break. They haven't had a break since, when we won the Champions League. Played a full season. They're 1 game away from an injury, some of these players. So I think the audit needs to happen. I think it was, you don't want to pinpoint it down to the change in medical staff or whatever, but I think that has to have a massive impact and a factor into it, because, we weren't seeing our players drop down the way they are now. Reece James, understandably, totally different kettle of fish, but the amount of injuries we picked up this season, it's scary. If you can build a injured 11, which is quality as well, it's not players that would be warming the bench all the time. This is first team regulars that are out of the team for a long period of time. It's, when you say things like that, you do have to put a bit of context into Graham Potter and how he's been underperforming, I suppose, recently. You have to put that in and caveat that into everything, because it's unheard of in some ways as well. You look at Liverpool, you look at City, if you took out Haaland, you took out Kevin De Bruyne out of their team, or you took out Van Dijk, you take out Alisson, you take out Mo Salah or Thiago out of their team, they'd fail as well, they'd struggle.
Yeah, we have seen it with Liverpool, I think, without Van Dijk. This weekend, they conceded 3 against Brighton. They like you said, they struggle without the likes of, they're struggling without Luis Diaz, they struggle without Mohamed Salah, without Thiago Alcantara, and those are like 3 or 4 players, and we've got currently, like you said, almost 11 first team regulars that are out injured. So I think, it's this audit is long overdue, and before kind of just pointing fingers, I think it's important to see what we can do to improve it. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Now I did say in the preview, Crystal Palace was a must. Well, I said Fulham was a must-win game, but I also said Crystal Palace was a must-win game. Obviously, going into that game next Saturday with Liverpool, we couldn't afford to go into that needing to win, and we still need to win. But at least we haven't. We've got 3 points on a tough period. But before we get into the game, obviously it was the first real attempt. Moment, I should say, for Chelsea to pay their respects to Gianluca Vialli, who passed away last week. Talented player, manager as well. I know from just looking on social media, there's been loads of tributes and just loads of, no one's got a bad word to say about Gianluca Vialli. And when you can't find anyone that can say anything bad about someone, he tells you the type of character that he was, able to have so many people want to share their views and tributes to him. But I know you're a lot closer than I am to the stadium. But what's it been like just around the stadium? And obviously, when the news broke the day that it did, what was it like? What's your memories of Gianluca Vialli?
I mean, obviously, I'm born in 1997, so it was slightly towards the era where Gianluca Vialli kind of stepped away from Chelsea. But my parents said amazing things about him. He'd be in local restaurants around Chelsea and he'd be sitting next to us at a table and he'd always be smiley. No one had a bad word to say about him. He almost felt like one of those Ray Wilkins characters where everybody has a story about him, and a positive story especially. And even you could see the players, even though some of these players are so even younger than me and they would have never, had him around. But the likes of Mason Mount, Jorginho, they looked so emotional yesterday during the tributes. And on match day yesterday, it was special. It really was special. Even when you were to scan your ticket to go into the stadium, there'd be a kind of a picture of Gianluca Vialli with the date he was born and the year he passed away. So I think they kind of redecorated the whole stadium to pay tribute and homage to Vialli. I think outside Stamford Bridge, there was a place you could write a small letter to a memory letter and put some flowers or pay your respects and tribute. And then before kickoff, that was really special, having all his past teammates and former players kind of come up on the pitch, alongside the Palace and the Chelsea players. The banners and the tifos that were displayed were really special. I was sat in Matthew Harding lower, and I was actually under the banner, so I couldn't really see what was happening on the pitch. But I think I sent a video to you after, and it was, lump in my throat moments, really, especially the tribute video, seeing the players get emotional and well up. And it's just, he was far too young, really far too young. And I'm really, really looking into now how the special player he was, the goals he scored at Old Trafford. He's some really special ones. He played player manager as well. I'm sure you've got so many memories to share about him, watching him especially. But no, a really emotional moment. I think it was alongside Ray Wilkins, one of the kind of former Chelsea players passing away. That's really, really touched me.
Yeah, and you're not alone. I think, you could ask a lot of Chelsea fans. They probably feel exactly how you did yesterday and beyond and before as well. For me, he was just, I remember him being one of the first, players that really struck out to me, even like a Zola, one of those players that just tore Andre Flo. We was at that kind of period where we were probably one of the first in the Premier League to look elsewhere from the UK, from England, for players. So some of these players were just unheard of to us, growing up. But when they came into the team, it was just it was the start of that period for us. I think when we were bringing in this quality of players, and even going back yesterday and seeing the players that Vialli did play with, even like the Danny Granvilles and Michael Dubrys and just so many, just took me back. Just seeing them sat there as well just took me back to those times. Jody Morris. It's such, very young in terms of his age, and he achieved so much, not just at Chelsea, but even, you think back to his time as in Italy national team as well, with the Euros and everything that happened there as well. Just a quality manager for us, quality player for us as well. Someone did tell me a story. I'm going to save it for when we do the podcast episode, actually. I'll save that. But he's just you can just tell that when no one's got nothing bad to say about you, it just tells you how many people respect you and what he's done, what he did for not just Chelsea but for football as well. I think all across the world. It was a sad day. It was one of those days where you just you almost want to 100%
pause what you're doing. We paused our work days and we just kind of really took in the news because it's something that takes a lot of time for it to sink in. But like you said, just 100% confirm it was accurate, and almost just scroll through Twitter, reading all the stories and tributes. It's just something you really need to dedicate some time to. So I'm glad we're going to maybe have a podcast episode specifically for Gianluca Vialli. I think that's much needed.
Yeah, definitely. But I'm going to save that story. I do want to move on and talk about the game itself, which, as I said, was a must-win game. We had to go into that game, regardless of who started and who was on the bench or whatever, and just the pressure that Graham Potter was under. These players had to play better than they did against Fulham and how they've been playing previously. But I was impressed. I know some fans weren't. They were still much the same, and I agree with that. But you could see there was a slight change in terms of tension to get the ball forward, to get it into the box, for Kai Havertz to try and do something. How we didn't score in that first half, I'll never know. We had as many chances as we needed to. But you can see that there's something now coming out of Hakim Ziyech and just trying to get the ball in. And that's all I've been asking for. Defensively, I still think we didn't look the best. But yeah, I mean, give me your thoughts, give me your assessment before I continue.
Yeah, defensively, I thought there's still a bit of areas we could do improving. I thought Benoit Badiashile had a very solid debut. He brought a bit of stability to defense. And seeing him in the flesh, he's a tall boy. He's a really tall boy. He's quite a tall guy. And I thought it was quite a difficult game to come straight into. He didn't really have any minutes, in the FA Cup game against City to kind of be introduced to English football. He was straight into a Premier League game, a London derby game as well, 90 minutes. And I thought he did really well. So credit to him. I thought there was some promising things. We created chances for once, which is not something we did in a lot of the previous games we played, under Graham Potter and during his period where we've been underperforming. I thought Ziyech and Gallagher were standout players for me. They were fantastic. Like you said, Ziyech always looked like he wanted to just get that ball in his left foot and just ping it into the box. And that's how he created the Havertz goal. And Gallagher as well. He was just running all over the place, working his socks off, being fouled left, right and centre as well. How he didn't score in that first half, like you said, a big chance for Lewis Hall. I think just if he can improve just on the shooting part of his game, that's going in the back of the net. Silva as well, I think, forced Guaita into a really good save.
Yeah, shot.
Yeah, really low shot. But then again, I think Kepa as well made some big saves from Crystal Palace players. I think Elise had a chance, Mitchell had a chance, Decore had a crazy volley, which I thought was just going into top bins, and Kepa managed to get a fingertip to it.
Yeah.
I didn't know his last couple minutes of the game, it was like pinball in the Chelsea box. And I was just sure that I was just going to creep into the Chelsea net and Palace were going to get a goal. But no, it was promising. I think when you get 3 points and a clean sheet, it's always a positive result. Especially I think Palace now, they've got a lot to play for because they've been not really getting the results they've been looking for. And I think a bit of pressure now is on Patrick Vieira. I was reading a bit of some tweets from some Palace fans yesterday, and they've got question marks now over Vieira and if he's the right man for the job. But no, I think I'm pleased with the performance. I really hope now we can just build a bit of momentum and consistency and get a couple more results, to get into the flow of things again. And like I always say about Havertz, sure, it's good him scoring a goal, but now he just needs to keep that up. He really needs to keep that up because we can't just have him scoring a goal once, then going missing for another 5-6 games and scoring again. All Chelsea fans are like, oh yeah, Havertz is back. But now he needs to keep it up, consistent. And he even had a big chance to score another header, I think a couple minutes after the first one. And he missed his chance. So I think he just needs to keep up the consistency now. But no, I'm pleased. Like I said, 3 points and a clean sheet.
Yeah, and that's all. I mean, I was recording a podcast last week, and that's all I want. I just want to see some consistency, some good football, attacking football, and I just want us to build some momentum now. I think even going into that Liverpool game, we saw what Brighton done to them at the weekend. There's nothing to say we can't go to Anfield and get something out of that game. Yes, João Felix won't be there, but if we can play how we played against Crystal Palace with a bit more intent, I think you can't go and waste all those chances at Anfield. It just comes back to haunt you. And we were lucky, like you said, at the end of that game, we didn't have Thiago Silva in that defence. You'd probably question, would it have been 1-0? Because he was literally, his head was on everything, getting it out of the box. Badiashile as well, like you said, I thought a really good debut, looked comfortable, didn't look unfazed. You look at Koulibaly and trying to compare the two, but Koulibaly, you don't really know what he's going to do with the ball, and you just felt there was that confidence in Badiashile. I thought he just looked like he fitted into the team, and to have that side of our left side, Lewis Hall next to him as well, anything could have happened. They could have. I mean, Crystal Palace really should have tried to capitalise that on that side, and I felt they were trying to get the left side, where Zaha was, and try and take on Chalobah more so than they did on the right side. But it worked for us, and I was impressed with, like you said, Hakim Ziyech, Conor Gallagher, who I was very critical previous games that he's played, but he came in and he done a job, whether it's because it was Palace and is he looking for the move there, or he knows some of the boys that play in there, I don't know, but he definitely put in a shift on the game, on yesterday's game. But Havertz, for me, I still don't want to see him playing as a striker. I just don't. And I think if the game didn't tell you anything, it tells you that he's good when he gets a chance, but he needs 10 of them to score. And I just think we've got Aubameyang, who I'm not impressed with at all. I'm not saying you should put Aubameyang in, but we've got Fofana on the bench, and I just think, what's he got to do? I mean, to get a run out. I mean, I probably would have brought him on ahead of Aubameyang just to see the game out. And we reverted back to a back five, I think, at one point during the end of that game. Marc Cucurella is still on the bench. I mean, if that doesn't tell you something, there's, Koulibaly didn't even feature. I mean, these players now, I mean, there was talk about Todd Bowley's not scared to, get rid of some of these players, even if they've just walked through the door. The Koulibalys, and Raheem Sterling's name, I think, has been mentioned recently as well. I mean, I'm all for that, but I think there has to be a transitional process of doing that as well. You don't want to bring in just a completely new squad and, do what Nottingham Forest have done. And that does, for me, that doesn't always work when you just bring in a bunch of players. We're going to talk about Mudryk now, who's presented to the crowd at half time. I mean, he's a really good, from what I've seen. I don't want to be one of these Twitter guys that says that they know everything about him, because I don't. But from what I've seen of him, and I've watched, and I have watched a couple of games that he's been involved in, but he looks like a really good player. Really good player. What's your expectations for Mudryk when he finally puts his Chelsea top on Saturday against Liverpool at Anfield?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I haven't watched too much of him, but what I've seen is he's an exciting player. He's got some experience in the Champions League. I think Shakhtar were in the same group with Celtic, Leipzig, and Real Madrid, and I think in all those games he performed well. I saw a couple of the goals he scored past Joe Hart against Celtic, and they were impressive goals. And when you pay 100 million, or a fee that could rise up to 100 million for a player, you've got big expectations. You expect him to come in and hit the ground running. He's 22. He's still young. I do think, I don't know if it was a question of, we really want this player, he'll fit the Chelsea kind of DNA or system, or whether it was just a question of Arsenal are linked to him. We can't let Arsenal get him. Let's try to sign him, because it seemed like he had really had his hopes on moving to Arsenal through his Instagram kind of stories he was posting. And I do think it's 100 million that we could have maybe invested as well into a central midfielder or CDM. There's just a more kind of pressing or urgent kind of area of the pitch that we need solving, and a player to kind of fill in there. And the logical solution there is Enzo Fernandez, where we kind of allowed things to just crumble with the negotiations, and we're not willing to meet their 120 million release clause with Benfica. But that being said, with the injuries we've currently got, I think we didn't really have many offensive players to come off the bench against Palace other than Aubameyang. So I think that just kind of gives us another option, and maybe it could be an exciting trio next season of, if we get Felix and we get Mudryk, or players who just offer a bit more dynamism and kind of a bit more flair than we've seen so far this season with Havertz, Mount, and those guys. So I think it's exciting, and I think he'll really relish the opportunity to play Liverpool at Anfield on his debut. It almost gives us a bit more excitement now watching Chelsea. We've got these new players that are coming in, and players that I think are young, that have an international experience, that have Champions League experience. And I do expect him to hit the ground running as well, like Felix did against Fulham. I think I just sent it to you before this pod, but there's some kind of maybe agreement that we may play Shakhtar in a friendly. Yeah. And some of the proceeds will go to helping the war in the Ukrainian victims during the conflict. So I think maybe that played a part in us getting him as well, and maybe us trying to amend our image of Chelsea's involvement during what happened with Abramovich last year. Yeah. So I think overall it's very positive. I do hope that he's committed to Chelsea. That's my big worry. But from seeing him yesterday at Stamford Bridge with the flag, smiling, and in the director's box, so far it's quite a promising start.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking for him coming in. One thing I've always said is, and I think this is where now, Graham Potter can't really use the injuries, and he hasn't. The fans more than Graham Potter, obviously, but he can't really use the excuse of not having the right players. These are his players coming in now. So if we get Nkunku as well, that's one of his players. If we do sign João Felix on a permanent deal, that's his player. Mudryk as well. All these players that are coming in, he's building. You can see, not that I can see the vision, but you can see that they're trying to do something, I think. And I say they, I mean Todd Bowley. But I'm excited to see him, especially against Liverpool. Trent, isn't the best defensively. And if from what I've been seeing, Roderick, if he performs like he does in some of his videos that people have been sending to me, I think Trent's in for a long afternoon down that right side. But without going into too much about Liverpool as well, I just wanted to talk briefly around Graham Potter, because I don't feel like we have on previous episodes, but can you see the vision? Do you see what Graham Potter is trying to do? And is it premature to even have that discussion because of the injuries as well? Because, I still don't see, does Graham Potter know his best 11? Does he know? That's again down to the injuries, but even his style of play, I know he likes to play with the three centre backs and uses the wing backs as wingers almost, but I just don't. Maybe it is too premature to have that conversation. Maybe we need to give him the summer to bring in who he needs to. But what's your thoughts so far on? That bad period that we're still in. Let's not, but one win, which is great. But this bad period we've been in, the records that I'm seeing, like the lowest league tally since 2015, 2016, and at both trophies, domestic cups, 34 years, the first time. Should the players be doing better? Should the manager be doing better? Getting the best out of these players regardless of injuries as well?
I think if you look at all the past managers we've had at Chelsea, it happens in cycles. I don't think any of them have stayed for more than 2 years. And then it always seems to be these quotes coming from the managers that it's the same group of players and they lack motivation, or they, I can't really get the best out of them, which obviously is never what you want to hear from a manager. But I remember Sarri saying that, Conte saying that, Lampard said it, and I think Tuchel in the summer after the 4-0 loss to Arsenal, he said something similar. So I think before kind of pointing to the manager, which I do agree needs to take some of the blame, I do feel like you said there's no kind of identity to how we play. I can't really understand. Does he have a favourite 11? Does he have a favourite formation? We're constantly switching between a back four and a back three. Cucurella and Lewis Hall, we don't know who's going to be starting each game, even not our centre backs now with Badiashile. Does that mean Koulibaly's out? We don't really know what is our best 11. I wouldn't be able to tell you that. But I think the players as well, they need to just really shake up. I spoke about Kovacic, who had a fantastic World Cup. And since he's come back from the World Cup, he's looked really, really poor. Havertz, Mount, two players that I think aren't immune to criticism, but they deserve criticism because they've been really poor this season. I think their goal numbers, especially Mount and his goal contributions, have been a lot lower than expected. Players that I think we've brought in the summer that I think are almost kind of rejects from other teams. I don't like calling them rejects, but Sterling wasn't getting the game time. We bring him in. I think this was something that you spoke about with Pitch Footy, I think it was. And, Sterling wasn't really getting the game time at City. We brought him in. Aubameyang, same, wasn't getting the game time at Barcelona. We brought him in. It almost seems like players that weren't really kind of favoured by the manager, and we just brought them in. And that's what I'm starting to question. Are they really committed to Chelsea? Yeah, are they just there to pick up their paycheck, or are they really committed to, playing for the badge and understand the kind of values of the club? And I just feel like there seems to be a lack of kind of players that were just giving it their all. Even I think Alonso, Christensen, Rudiger, we look back now, those are players maybe we took for granted. We really did take for granted. So I think there needs to be some kind of, these players, I don't know if it's Azpilicueta, if it comes from the captain, if it comes from the manager, but there needs to be some kind of meeting, or I think there was crisis talks held between Azpilicueta, Jorginho, and some of the senior players with Potter and Silva. I do hope that somehow amended the relationship between the two if there was any kind of problems. But I do think it needs to come from the players first. And I like you said, I'm more kind of in favour of this clear out in the summer. If it means getting rid of, I don't like calling them dead wood, but players that aren't really 100% committed, that are just there to pick up their paycheck, that don't really see themselves at Chelsea for beyond the kind of vision or the project or the years left on their contracts. Yep. So yeah, I think I do want to see more from Graham Potter. Like I've said before, I want to kind of see a clear identity and way of style of play that we offer on the pitch. But I also want these players to really show a bit more drive and a bit more commitment, especially when the fans have been so loyal to them, week in, week out. So I think it needs to start from there.
Yeah, and I agree. And I was very critical, not just after the Fulham game, but I know looking back, watching back, listening back, getting feedback from people, some of the comments I've made are very, very harsh on Graham Potter, and I get that 100%. But I do think as well, as a manager, you have to adapt. And whether that's change your formation, you change your style of play, you drop players that are not performing for you, the Kai Havertz or the Mason Mounts or Mateo Kovacic. And something seems to tell me that the Palace game yesterday, something dropped, the pennies dropped in Graham Potter's head or whatever, because, you know, Cucurella has now missed the last 2 games. Koulibaly, who, you know, obviously Todd Bowley was in the Twitter space yesterday, but obviously there's someone telling these guys, you know, that these are not, that he doesn't seem comfortable. So they got Koulibaly, you know, Mateo Kovacic as well, like you just mentioned, hasn't been the best since, whether he's, I think he might be carrying an injury. You know, I think he's either carrying an injury, I think it was a couple of years ago, Marcus Rashford literally played a whole season with an injury. I think when Oli was still there. I feel like Kovacic is doing the same. I think he's just playing through this injury. Could be that. But I think there has to be some more leadership. I agree with you. You know, Thiago Silva's and Cesar Azpilicueta, the captain, has to do the John Terry treatment and get them in that dressing room and shake things up a little bit. Whether he's doing that or not, we don't know. But, you know, there has to be some like structure to what we're trying to do. And at the moment, I just feel like we're just winging it a little bit. Just because we've got these injuries, we're using that as the reason why we can't get results. And we can get results with this squad. You know, you look at Southampton, you know, in the cup against Man City, as I think I said on the videos before, they beat Man City. Newcastle, even yesterday, Newcastle, rightfully or wrongfully, they didn't deserve to win yesterday, but they did. They got the 3 points. So, you know, I think there's a way of losing. And then there's a way of losing with a bit of pride and a bit of dignity and playing for the badge and being 110% committed, which is what we need from these players. So, you know, I think the next couple of months, you know, the summer will tell us 100% who's committed, who's not. Is Graham Potter the right man for the job? All those questions will be answered, I think, then, because, you know, I think I've just been reading then, you know, because Caicedo from Brighton is meant to be next on the list of, you know, the list. We want it done by the end of the week. So, you know, if that's true, or Lav from Southampton, if one of those two come in, then it tells me that Graham Potter is, which he is, he's being 110%. He's being backed by the owner. But Trossard, I think Spurs have just put a bid in for Trossard for 12 million. So it wouldn't surprise me if we try and entice Trossard to come to Stamford Bridge as well. But before we wrap up, I do want to ask, because I feel like we're just almost buying Brighton, and that worries me a little bit, because we've already got Cucurella, who it hasn't really worked with as of yet. I mean, that might just be a system thing, or it might just be, I don't know, confidence thing, whatever. But I'm not keen on just buying players that Graham Potter's worked with before. And that sounds great on paper that we're buying these players in, but I think we need to get the right player in, not just because the manager's worked with him before. That's a good option to just go for Caicedo or Lavia. I mean, Lavia's Southampton, I think, ex-Manchester City player, really good player. I think he rather fits the profile of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all in favour of managers kind of going to their former clubs and picking out the players that they want, and especially when it works with them and they know them so well. I think we saw it with Sarri and Jorginho, and say what you want about Jorginho, but it's worked. He's won 2 European Cups with us, and he's been a great player for us across the years. But I think now it's almost Potter's just kind of, he's bought all his old backroom staff with him, not just players. He's bought Cucurella, and I think Cucurella would be really fitted Brighton style of play. It's not just a manager, but the way Brighton played with the players around them. We've seen him now for 6 months, and it hasn't worked out for Cucurella. I want to stay optimistic and say things will get better, but from what I've seen of him, he's not the left back that Chelsea need. And we're linked now with Moises Caicedo, I think Ecuadorian international, good player. But I do kind of worry now after what's happened with Cucurella that maybe he's just so good with this Brighton team and the players that were around him and their system, and that if he comes to Chelsea, it might just be another Cucurella, and he might look a bit lost. He might, be underperforming compared to other players and more experienced players around them. So I don't know. I think this strategy of maybe going for younger players that are they've only got 1 or 2 years under their belt of Premier League experience, sometimes it's not the best thing to do. I've said it a few times. We saw it with Havertz as well in the Bundesliga. He had one good year at Leverkusen, I think top goal scorer in the Bundesliga. Same with Werner. We said, let's go, let's give them the money they want. And it hasn't been the players that we were in the Bundesliga. And that's why I've said it so many times in this podcast, the players that often perform are the most experienced ones that you bring in. The Silvers, the Fabregases, those ones.
The free transfers.
Free transfers, exactly. And I said it so many times, we missed out on Lewandowski. We really missed out on Lewandowski last summer.
I watched him last night. He was good.
He's good. Good player.
Super Cup. Yeah.
Good player. So yeah, they could be really good players. They could be gems, but you just never really know what happens once they sign the contract at Chelsea and they put on the shirt.
It's a massive gamble. It's a massive
gamble, yeah.
gamble. But listen, we got the 3 points. That's the main thing. So let's not all start. I mean, someone was have our Liverpool match preview near the end of the week, so maybe Thursday, Friday. We'll do our predicted lineup, do all of that stuff as well. Hopefully, we can get 3 points. Depends on the ref, actually, doesn't it? I mean, if we get our friends, then yeah, we don't know. But yeah, definitely looking forward to that game. As always, Anfield's always a difficult ground to go to, but I do think we can get 3 points. But I'll save that all for end of the week. But right, if you haven't already, like at the start of this, make sure you go and subscribe to the channel. Linktree link is in the description as well, so it will take you to all our previous episodes and all our social accounts as well. Theo, as always, thank you very much. Therapy session is over for the week. We should call this From the Shed End therapy session or something, because we always call it a therapy session, but it is good to talk about Chelsea, good or bad. But yeah, thank you very much for joining me as well, as always. And we'll be back next week with another episode. So From the Shed End 78. Thank you very much for watching.